Ready for some stories about how tech companies really get started?
I am. Should be fascinating.
We're diving into Jessica Livingston's Founders at Work. It's kind of refreshing, actually.
Yeah.
It ditches the usual, like the glamorous stories about famous tech heroes.
Right.
And instead, we get these like raw and honest stories about what it's actually like to build a company from the ground up.
Yeah, it's a completely different perspective, isn't it? Like, we're so used to hearing about these, you
Yeah.
know, billion-dollar valuations and success stories.
Yeah.
But this book takes us behind the scenes, into those early days when these companies were just like scrappy startups.
Totally. It's like we think of startups as all like beanbag chairs and fancy offices. But this book, like, opens with programmers coding in towels to meet deadlines.
Exactly. It's that hustle
Yeah,
that really comes across in these stories.
totally. And it really makes you realize that there's no one right way to build a company, you know?
It's definitely not about following a formula.
Right. It's about like pure hustle and a willingness to, get your hands dirty and just figure things out.
And to embrace the unconventional, right? I mean, so many of these founders, they didn't follow the traditional playbook.
Totally. Like, think about PayPal.
Oh yeah,
They were tackling online fraud when, like, banks wouldn't even touch it.
it was the Wild West back then. Like nobody knew what they were doing.
Seriously. And the risks seemed insane.
Huge.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how they like dove headfirst into this problem.
Yeah.
Max Levchin, he's one of the co-founders. He talks about spending hours analyzing fraudulent transactions himself.
Wow.
He brought on this like Stanford dropout intern to help combat the fraud.
Really?
And this intern, they basically gave him free rein to just like experiment and come up with new ideas.
That's amazing.
And it speaks volumes about their mindset.
Yeah.
They weren't afraid to try unconventional things, to trust their gut.
And it paid off for them.
Oh, absolutely.
What's amazing to me is that they didn't just, try to stop fraud. Like, they outsmarted it.
They were way ahead of the curve.
They were analyzing data, understanding the psychology of these fraudsters, developing algorithms that were like light years ahead of what anyone else was using.
And that's what it took. Because the banks, they were stuck in their old ways of thinking.
Right.
But PayPal, they saw an opportunity to do things differently.
It's like they were building the plane while flying it,
Totally. And speaking of doing things differently, let's talk about Hotmail.
Oh, yeah. Good one.
So today, I mean, web-based email, it seems obvious, right?
Totally.
But back then, it was a huge gamble.
Nobody was doing that.
And they were growing at this like insane rate, facing challenges that nobody had ever encountered before.
And let's not forget, they were going up against giants like Microsoft.
Exactly. So Bir Bhatia, one of the Hotmail co-founders, he talks about how like Microsoft, with all its resources, they were struggling to handle even a fraction of the users that Hotmail had.
It's incredible how quickly they grew.
Yeah, and their growth strategy was just like genius.
Tell me more about that.
So they basically added this little line to every outgoing email that said, get your private free email at, and then the Hotmail URL.
Smart. So simple, but so smart.
Talk about viral marketing before, viral marketing was even a thing.
It spread like wildfire. It's amazing.
It shows that sometimes the simplest ideas are the most effective, especially when you're starting out.
For sure. And it highlights how important it is to like think outside the box, especially in those early stages when resources are tight.
Totally. And they were laser focused on the user experience, which I think is so crucial.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just about having a decent product. It was about making it so easy to use.
Yeah.
And so easy to share with others.
It's something that a lot of companies forget today, I think.
They really understood that word of mouth. That was everything back then.
Especially in those early days.
Exactly. But even with their incredible growth, they faced a ton of uncertainty.
Wait, what?
Like when Rocket Mail emerged, remember them?
Oh, yeah. I'd almost forgotten about them.
They came out of nowhere with a really similar concept, and it was a real threat.
Right, because back then it was all about like who could capture the most users the fastest.
It shows how quickly the landscape can change,
Totally. Like 1 minute you're on top of the world, the next minute you've got a dozen competitors breathing down your neck.
And you're constantly having to adapt and evolve just to keep up.
Speaking of adapting and evolving, we have to talk about web TV.
Oh yeah, web TV. That's a wild ride.
I mean, seriously, the idea of putting the internet on your TV back in the mid-90s?
People thought they were crazy.
That's Steve Perlman for you. Always thinking big.
And he faced so much skepticism.
I bet. I mean, it was such a new concept.
But he was convinced that this was the future. that people would want to access the internet from their living room.
And look at how things have changed. I mean, we have smart TVs, streaming services. It's incredible.
It's amazing to think that he was envisioning all of this back then.
It makes you realize that the best ideas often seem crazy at first.
You have to be willing to challenge the status quo.
Definitely.
And Perlman, he was not afraid to be bold. But Perlman, he wasn't just a big thinker. He was also like a serious doer.
Oh, I bet. That's how you gotta be.
He actually built a working prototype of web TV in a single weekend.
Seriously?
Yeah, like just imagine that. A weekend
That's incredible.
to go from an idea to a working prototype.
Wow.
It's mind-blowing.
So that must have helped him get some attention.
Oh, yeah, he ends up getting a deal with Sony, one of the biggest names in tech.
Huge.
And it seems like things are finally falling into place.
Right.
But then, get this, Sony backs out at the last minute.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they basically leave Perlman high and dry.
Wow, I can't believe it.
It's brutal out there, even with a great idea.
Seriously, though, the startup world is not for the faint of heart.
No, it's not. But Perlman, he doesn't give up.
Of course not.
He manages to secure another deal, this time with Philips. And eventually, Microsoft comes along and acquires Web TV for a cool $500 million.
Wow, what a roller coaster.
Talk about a wild ride.
It makes you wonder what kept these guys going through all the ups and downs.
That's the thing about these founders, though,
Yeah.
right? They had this drive, this passion.
I see it.
It wasn't just about the money for them.
It was more than that.
They were driven by this desire to solve problems, to make a difference.
I can relate to that.
Like Dan Brooklyn, for example, the guy who created VisiCalc.
I've heard that. What was it again?
It was basically the world's first spreadsheet software.
No way, really?
Yeah, this was before Excel, before Lotus 1-2-3.
Wow, I can't even imagine.
It's hard to grasp how revolutionary it was at the time.
I bet.
And the thing is, he developed VisiCalc when memory was incredibly limited.
We're talking like kilobytes, right?
Kilobytes, not gigabytes, kilobytes.
That's insane. How did he even...
He had to optimize every single line of code.
It's mind-boggling.
And, even after VisiCalc became successful,
Mm.
he faced a bunch of challenges with his publisher,
Oh, no, really?
which actually ended up impacting how much money he made from it.
That's so frustrating.
Yeah, it's tough, but you know what? He didn't let it stop him.
I like his style.
He went on to create other innovative software because that's who he was, a problem solver, an
Yeah.
innovator.
I respect that. Sticking with it even when things get tough.
Exactly. It's about the passion,
Absolutely. And that's something you see again and again with these founders.
It's like this underlying theme.
Totally.
They were driven by something deeper than just making a quick buck.
It had to be.
Like, take Yahoo, for example. They were one of the early giants of the internet, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And their approach was fascinating.
How so?
They really believed in this idea of an open system,
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They prioritized the user experience above everything else,
Even over profits.
even over profits.
Wow, that's pretty radical, especially back then.
They were actively linking to their competitors. Can you believe that?
No way, really.
It sounds crazy in today's world,
Seriously, like who does that?
but that was their philosophy. They wanted to connect users with the information they were looking for, even if it meant sending them to a competitor's site.
It's like they were saying, we trust our users to make the best choice, even if it's not us.
Exactly. It was a long-term vision,
It makes you wonder if that approach would still work today.
It's an interesting thought, isn't it?
For sure, it's a different world now.
It makes you appreciate the idealism of those early internet pioneers.
Okay, so we've talked about PayPal, Hotmail, WebTV, Yahoo, and this VisiCalc, but we can't forget about Apple, right?
We can't talk about tech pioneers without talking about Apple.
Exactly. But what's fascinating is that this book, it takes us back to Apple's humble beginning.
Long before the iPhones and the Apple Watches.
Yeah, we're talking about a tiny office, a shoestring budget, two Steves with a dream, and a whole lot of passion.
And a whole lot of late nights.
I bet. So much hustle.
Wozniak, he talks about how they were incredibly resourceful. They were sharing office space, driving a beat-up car just to make ends meet.
It's a good reminder that even the biggest companies, they all started somewhere small.
It's true. You got to start somewhere. It just goes to show you don't need a fancy office or a ton of money to make a difference.
It's really inspiring, actually.
It is. It's about the grit, the
Even
determination.
the willingness to, like, put in the work, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And they face their share of setbacks, too, like any startup.
Oh, I bet. What was one of their biggest challenges?
On the Apple third, it was a total flop.
Oh, yeah, I vaguely remember that.
It could have sunk them,
Seriously?
but they didn't let it.
What'd they do?
They learned from their mistakes. They came back stronger with the Macintosh.
It's that whole thing, right? It's not about avoiding failure. It's about how you respond to it.
It's about resilience, bouncing back.
So important. I feel like that's something people don't talk about enough.
It's the key to success in any field, I think, but especially in the startup world.
For sure. You're going to face challenges. It's how you deal with them that matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, sometimes those challenges, they come from within,
What do you mean?
like self-doubt, for example.
I can see that.
Like Evan Williams, the co-founder of Blogger, he talks about this.
Blogger. Wow, that takes me back.
Yeah, so this is back in 2001 during the dot-com bust.
Oh, wow. Rough time to be in tech.
It was brutal, and everyone thought he was crazy for sticking with Blogger.
I can imagine everyone else is jumping ship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's getting all this pressure, financial uncertainty.
Right.
It'd been so easy to just walk away.
I'm not sure I would have had the guts to stick with it.
It takes a special kind of person to weather that storm.
So what happened?
Well, Williams, he persevered even when the world seemed like it was falling apart.
Wow.
He held onto his vision, and eventually, Blogger became a huge success.
It's amazing how things can turn around like that.
It's a testament to the power of belief.
Believing in your idea even when nobody else does.
Exactly. But, not all the founders in this book were, like, trying to change the world.
What do you mean?
Like Paul Graham, for example, the guy behind ViaWeb.
Remind me, what was ViaWeb?
It was one of the first online store builders.
Oh, right, like Shopify, but way back in the day.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that they didn't set out to revolutionize e-commerce or anything like that.
So what were they trying to do?
They were just trying to solve a problem for a specific group of people, catalog companies.
Okay, I see.
But it turned out that small businesses, they were the ones who really embraced ViaWeb.
Interesting how things work out like that.
You never know who your ideal customer is going to be.
Makes you think you got to be open to, like, adjusting your course along the way.
Absolutely. And Graham, he really understood the importance of user experience.
Even back then.
Oh, yeah. He talks about how much of the software back then was just, like, terrible to use.
I can imagine it was a different time.
And he was determined to make ViaWeb different. He wanted it to be simple, intuitive.
User-friendly.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how innovative your technology is.
Right, if people can't use it.
It's gotta be usable.
Makes sense, and it's something that I think still rings true today.
Oh, absolutely. The best products, they're the ones that just disappear,
What do you mean?
Like you don't even think about them, they just work.
Ah, I see what you mean.
It's about making technology invisible.
Interesting way to put it.
And it's something that a lot of companies today, they seem to have forgotten.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We really have, from PayPal to Apple to Blogger and everything in between.
And I think the overarching theme that emerges from all these stories is that while the technology itself is important,
It's really the people behind it that make all the difference.
their vision, their determination, their willingness to defy the odds,
Their passion, their resilience.
and their unwavering belief in the power of technology to change the world.
It's inspiring, really.
It is, and it's a good reminder that anyone can make a difference.
You don't have to be a tech genius. You don't need a ton of money.
You just need a good idea, a willingness to work hard.
And the courage to pursue your dreams.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep believing in the power of technology to shape a better future.